So let's start with our PM series. So before, today we have two amazing speakers, but first let me tell you a little bit about our online community, which is Her Tech Hour. We are an organization where we host web series of educational webinars aiming to inform, connect, and develop women leaders in different fields of technology. We're a group of passionate women coming from diverse backgrounds and different stages of our tech career. We aim to make the lives of our colleagues better. We want to empower women by providing a platform that will guide them in navigating their way through the tech industry. We invite you to be unapologetically ambitious. So this is our PM series. This is our fourth webinar, and we are hosting the PM series with industry leaders to help you learn more about different roles in the product field to grow and transition into your career. Today's panel is around the question, how do I become a PM? Let me present you to our amazing speakers. Our first speaker is Chaitra. She is a senior product manager at Couchbase, a non-SQL database company leading databases tooling, cross-data center replication, and partner integration. Her prior gigs include data analytics, product management for Kaiser Permanente, and software development for HP. She has a master from Carnegie Mellon in engineering and technology innovation management. In her free time, she enjoys reading nonfiction. Our next speaker is Vidya. She is an engineer, a speaker, and singer. She works as a senior PM at Microsoft and is responsible for the growth strategy of Microsoft Teams in SBMS and emerging markets. Prior to that, she incubated and launched SharePoint Spaces. Vidya has built 21 patents for her work. She is a passionate advocate for diversity and inclusion in tech. She was nominated to be the general chair for the coveted Grace Hopper Conference for 2019 and 2020. 3 years into her career, she was profiled by Microsoft for pursuing a multidimensional career in tech. Vidya, since then, has been featured by Forbes, Channel 9, Crosscut, The Woman in Tech Show, and Microsoft Research, to name a few. She is a guest lecturer at the University of Washington and a recipient of the Standing Young Alumna Award by North Carolina State University. Thank you to our speakers for being here with us today. I'm Bianca Alvarez. I'm going to be the moderator for today's panel. A little bit about me. I'm doing my Master in Science and Software Engineering at the University of Texas at El Paso. I was Vice President of the organization Women in Computer Science, and now I'm NC-WIT Aspire T Program Leader, NC-WIT Change Leader Scholar, and CASI Scholar. I'm passionate about empowering Latina girls through technology and educational programs. I co-founded Her Tech Hour with other amazing women and organizations, including Indian Women in Computing and Nepali Women in Computing. So let's start with our panel. We're going to start with some questions that we have right now, but feel free to add any questions on the chat, and I'm going to make sure to cover as much as questions possible. So let's start with the first question. Vidya, can you tell us a little bit what is your story in becoming a PM in tech?
There you go. Thank you for unmuting me. So my story is actually not that jazzy, to be honest. I pursued my bachelor's in computer science. I pursued my master's in computer science. I was very passionate about human-computer interaction. I think that's my jam. So I got an opportunity to interview with Microsoft for an internship. And I interviewed, and the interviewer found that I would be a better PM than an engineer, to be honest. And he was like, do you want to actually, kind of intern as a product manager? And I'm like, why not? Sure, because at that point in time, I was like, Microsoft, that's where I want to be. I don't really care what the position is, right? So that's how it started. And I also felt internship was a fantastic experimentation ground to kind of see, get a feel for the position and see if you like it. So I gave it a shot. I absolutely loved it, and I came back as a full-time product manager. So I guess my story is a pointer to anyone who thinks that you need an experience, you need prior work experience to be a PM. That is not true. I had zero work experience when I started my journey as a PM at Microsoft.
Thank you, Vidya. Chaitra, can you tell us about your story on becoming a PM?
Okay, hi everyone, and thanks Vidya. That was a great start to this show. So, yeah, like Vidya mentioned, I would say like if you ask me about my journey, there are two versions of it. Where I think yes, my official journey into product management was fairly simple. Like Vidya itself, like I came to the US to do my masters in an interdisciplinary major, which involved computer science, design, and strategy. So much before this, I sort of knew that I wanted to be a PM, and I think that's the more interesting part of the story because it was during the time when PM was not really product management was like an esoteric term. Nobody does it, like at least back in India, nobody did it mostly, and even here it was like, okay, what do you want to do? What is that role? And it looks like a jack of all. What do people actually do in this role? So I think as we progress through the session, I'll give you a little bit more ground on like how did I discover that I wanted to be one, or probably I was just one without an official title much before that. But my official journey was pretty simple. I did my masters, and my masters really helped me to hone that holistic thinking because it was an interdisciplinary major of not just building things, but actually to think about like, okay, why should you build something, and what is the impact of building something, and whatever you're trying to build, is it even technologically feasible, and do you think it is realistic, and make those decisions more judiciously.
And
And yet, I think, yeah, sure. I just wanted to like sum this up with stating that be it Vidya or be it me, both of us like started off right after our masters as PMs. So yes, experience definitely counts, and we have become better PMs over time, but it's not a non-starter.
Chaitra, can you tell us a little bit about your responsibilities in the PM role right now?
Yeah, sure. So I work currently as a PM for an enterprise product. So when you talk about responsibilities of a PM, there are a few different versions again for this once again. So it's what one PM does is not the same thing as another PM does. It's completely depends from product to product, and it also depends from the phase of the product. So I'm currently in an enterprise software PM, especially owning an infrastructure product, which is like a heavily technical product. I'm a PM on a databases product. So a lot of what I do involves, yes, identifying the top application trends, identifying the top tech trends for data, big data, and all the goodness of what is coming in, so that we can build a database that really scales well, that really operates well, and gives you the responsiveness that you expect with most of the applications that you deal with today, and it's always up and running. And so it requires market research, it requires thinking about it requires a lot of technical depth with respect to like how does systems function, how does distributed systems function, how does databases function, a very strong CS knowledge. And and that's up to the part of like writing the requirements and understanding how we are building something. And then it requires a lot of go to market with activities, which deals with how do we take whatever we build and make it successful in the market. That is about enabling sales teams, because with enterprise products you have to really train the sales teams to sell your product. It's not a consumer product which you can just download from anywhere. So a lot of sales enablement, promoting the product with respect to blogs and webinars and everything alike.
Thank you. Vidya, can you tell us a little bit more about your responsibilities in your PM role?
I think maybe she's muted again.
I think we lost Vidya. Chaitra, can you tell us a little bit more about there's a question that it's always asked uh, for people that are interested like in going into the PM role. They ask what are the skills or experiences needed to stand out as an applicant for the PM role.
Yeah, sure. So once again, this is very subjective to the kind of product that you are applying for, because with each kind, so with product, what comes is technology, product, and market, right? So the technology comes in like, okay, what is the technology that you are most familiar with? Because you have to ultimately lead a team to build something that you envision. So you need some amount of depth there, and it depends, it totally depends on the kind of product. I would say the top three skills which applies for any PM would be very strong communication skills, both verbal and non-verbal, written and um, non-written, verbal communication, very strong communication skills, because you have to communicate with up and down the stack, and you have to bring different people across the board on the same page to believe in what you think is right, and then influence them and bring together different, marry different ideas to ultimately shape a product. So you're constantly communicating, so communication is extremely important. In addition to communication, it's like problem solving skills. So it's okay, even if you don't have an engineering background to be a PM, it's totally fine. But what is important, I think why like engineers become PMs a lot more, is because it's also a very analytical role. Like constantly we are solving problems, different kind of problems every single day. So you need to be somebody who can grasp things really quickly, operate on your feet, and really suggest things. So strong problem solving abilities, communication, strong problem solving abilities. And what comes the third, I would say, is leadership. Yes, one thing that you will often hear about product management is leadership without authority, and that's very true, right? None of the engineers who actually build the product would report to a PM, or be it marketing, or be it sales, be it anybody whom you have to work with day to day. Nobody reports to you, but you really have to have the influence and the ability to lead them, where you actually give them something to come back to you, and believe in what you are saying, so that they actually go and sell your product, so they actually build your product, and have that voice that, okay, you are adding input. So I think leadership skills are extremely important. So these are the three core important things that I would think which are important. And how you demonstrate these skills in your resume becomes a key trait about how you get shortlisted for any of the PM skills, or and be considered. And how you demonstrate these three things in an interview will be crucial in you become a when you getting an offer for being a PM.
Sounds good. Thank you. Vidya, can you tell us about your responsibilities as a PM in tech?
Absolutely. And I'm sorry, like Zoom kind of kicked me out. So I kind of
Yeah,
had to like rejoin. So
okay.
um, sure. I was trying to make a sarcastic joke over there, but I'll save that for later. So right now I work as a product manager on Microsoft Teams. So the moment Zoom kicked me out, I actually went to look at the logs to see why it kicked me out. Right. So in the middle of a meeting. So my responsibilities on a day in day out basis. So the way I look at product management, you can classify it in several ways, but one way I like to classify is, are you a feature product manager or are you a growth product manager, right? Like the growth PM role, I think is kind of like, it's very niche. It's very, up and coming. So I am one of the growth PMs now. For like the past, 6 something years, I worked as, a generalist, like, feature PM. But what I do right now is basically, I don't build specific features for Microsoft Teams, but I look at figuring out the strategy, building the vision for how do you grow Microsoft Teams. right? And it is so relevant now, given, we are doing everything remote and the world is kind of relying on, virtual, technologies. So I own the portfolio of growing Microsoft Teams for SMBs, or what we call small and medium businesses. So these are your bakeries, these are your mom and pop shops, these are any, stores that are less than a set number of, employees. So less than 1,000, less than 2,000, however you want to, segment that, right? But a lot of what I do right now is, just thinking about the strategy, thinking about the growth, and thinking about the vision for how can we go from N million to, X million, and then how can we multiply that. And not only that, I look at every step of the funnel. And this is where I think Chaitra and I will be touching on, why analytical skills and metrics and all of that is so essential for a product manager. So I also look at not only just bringing in the users, how do you retain them in the service? How do you monetize the users, and make sure that the company, bottom line, like, the top line increases. So I look at all of these fun aspects for Microsoft Teams at the moment. Before this, I worked in virtual reality for about 3 years, where I was the only and the lead. Well, I can call myself lead because I was the only PM there, but I was building and incubating and launching this very futuristic service called, SharePoint Spaces, which basically looked at how can enterprises, communicate and collaborate using virtual reality, right? So I worked on that for the past 3 years, and it was an amazing, experience. And then I felt at one point became a full circle. We launched a product, and then I got this itch to go try do something else, and then I moved to Teams.
That's amazing. And what are the skills, or did you think that someone can stand out as an applicant for a PM role?
Oh, so this I think is an interesting question. I think it depends upon which level are we talking about. Let's just assume that these are entry-level product managers, like somebody right out of college, right? I would definitely look for things that are not the norm, because when you look at a resume, everyone has courses, everyone has their GPAs, everyone has their academic projects, everyone has that, right? So my eye usually goes to see what is interesting about you. Like, who are you as a person, and what is interesting about you that is not present in the rest of the 999 applications, right? So an example of that would be, did you run a nonprofit? Did you volunteer with a nonprofit? Did you go build an app? Did you participate in a hackathon, right? Did you win a hackathon, right? Did you do something that and not that puts you on the spotlight at some point? And it doesn't have to be like grandiose, like it can be something as simplistic as, hey, I volunteered for this nonprofit to build a website for them, right? Or I participated in this hackathon and collaborated with like 4 people from 3 different cities, and then we built this app. Like, anything that kind of screams that, hey, I am entrepreneurial, I am different, and I am beyond just my coursework and my academic projects. Like that, I think is definitely the hook to have someone look at the other things that you have. Okay. Right?
And do you recommend like to have that on the resume, right? Like to
absolutely, absolutely. If you have, first of all, try to get these experiences, join a student body, volunteer, and like how you're doing, Bianca. Like, you're not doing this as part of your coursework, right? But the moment you put this in your resume, I am automatically drawn to trying to learn more about who's Bianca, right? Like, so I think that's the hook, because everybody else has the baseline is pretty standard, right? And beyond that, what I would also look for in academic projects, once you have this, or your internships, is talk about the impact. Like, don't just say, I built this app, with 5 other people, I, use this technology, I did this. Great. Why? What did you turn around by doing all of that, right? Like, impact, talk in terms of impact. Because the moment you say, I built this app in 3 months, and it, we were able to launch it, and 800 people used it in the first 3 months, now you're talking, right? Because let's be honest, like, every time people say that I did everything in a group project, that's a big red flag for me, at least, because that basically shows that you're either not talking about your collaboration skills, or you're trying to project an image that is not entirely true. Right? So I would say, try to make your resume interesting, so that it stands out. And then when talking about your coursework or projects, try to project more of the impact that you achieved than just than just like saying, I did this and I did that.
Thank you. That's a great advice. And how can I like an example like me, how can I make sure that the PM role is right for me? What how can I
How
know?
can you make sure that the PM role is right for you?
Yeah, how can I know that it's like my to go? What is
That's such a
like the
philosophical question. That is such a deep question.
yeah.
But I would say this, right? At a fundamental level, like everybody is a technologist, like be it a product manager, be it a designer, be it an engineer. It's just how you apply your technical chops is different, right? So if you are someone who's naturally, drawn to kind of think about big ideas, right? If you're someone who's naturally drawn to figuring out why did that person build this, like why did Facebook go and invest 6 billion in geo, like why in India, right? Like if you're somebody who naturally has that curiosity to go and think about the product decisions, think about why products are built the way it is built, right? Then product management might be a good fit for you, right? Like what I would hate is for everybody to think that, oh, I'm not good at coding, so I'm going to go to product management. It is not the default case in your switch case. It is no, like that is a very wrong misnomer, because if you assume that, oh, I suck at coding, so I'm going to go be a PM, then you're going to be miserable in a PM role as well, right? So you have to have that fire within you in a way to kind of be the person who is able to think about a problem when it is not obvious, who is able to think about a solution which is way beyond when customers might actually end up adopting. Like Chaitra, like some of the products that Chaitra and I work on, we think about some of these problems and solutions years before people might actually end up using it, right?
Right.
So you got to be comfortable being in that headspace, being in that problem space. Chaitra, what do you think?
Yeah, sure. I think you led the way really well. It was a good segue for me to get in. So I'll just like when I started this conversation, I mentioned very briefly that my formal journey started after my master's degree, but probably as my unofficial journey as a PM had started much before that. So this was something that I recently discovered, I would say, when I was just reflecting on my own experience to think, hey, what have I been doing, and how have I been evolving? And so I can say that, okay, like right in my first job, like goes back like 7 to 8 years ago, when right after undergrad I had joined this HP as an organization, again like 10 thousands of people, and in an ocean I was like a new grad who's just joining as an engineer, and who's just given tasks. But I still remember, I have like clear instances even back then, that for every feature that I was given, I constantly bothered my senior folks about like, hey, why are we building this, and who makes these decisions that this should be the feature which is going in, and why not something else? And these are the top tech trends today. Why are we not like using that in our products? So, and a lot of times back then, people were like, oh my god, like why, like we are not making these decisions. We are told to do this, and that was not the answer for me. And then I was like this front runner who's like, whenever there are these extracurricular activities, like what should we build next? I was like me. I want to give like, I have this idea, I have that idea, I have some other idea. Maybe it was not all like great, or it doesn't matter, right? That was something that I was constantly drawn to doing. So, and so these are like some examples. Like even there were examples where like just 3 months down, when especially a new grad has joined a company like HP, and I was asked by one of my senior managers to like host the next town hall. Like town halls are where you talk about numbers, you talk about business strategy, you talk about like what has the, you literally interview the top business unit folks to ensure like how their decisions are driving the revenue. And it was like, for me, like I had no idea about all this, but I was so curious to learn about all this that I went back and took online courses to just be good at it. So and this just continued right over the time, that even I spent as a developer, I could see that there were a lot of concrete examples. Like I ran a newsletter, like how Vidya was mentioning, which just out of my curiosity, I wanted to just share things that I learn out of interest, and that became one of the most popular newsletters in the entire org. Like people just knew me because I was the one who was sending out those posters on like what's new and what's happening and what's curious. So I was constantly thinking about like not being a PM or anything at that point, but like if I'm sending out something, how is it going to be curious and create interest in people? They get 10,000 emails a day, let's say even 1,000 emails a day. Why should somebody look at mine? So every week I was investing time in like inserting some creative juices. And I was called for meetings, to lead meetings where I was not even supposed to be a participant, because people just felt that when I was driving meetings, the entire group was more energetic. So today I'm actually able to look back at these and think that these were actually all PM skills. But I just
Yep.
didn't know back then that these are important for being a PM. So probably when I honed into becoming a PM, I was almost ready for it much before. I learned a little bit more of the mechanics of how to apply this in the right way and how to apply this to build products better. And it's getting better with over the years. But I think you, some of these things, like whatever it can be, you need, you just reflect on yourself. And don't, I would say, like what Vidya mentioned, product management is not a fallback option, because it's a very intense role. I would say it's like you have to move the needle. And even being here every day, I am so intimidated, because you are influencing a lot of folks. And every day I wake up that, okay, how do I influence today? And it's challenging, it's intriguing, but it's not a fallback option. If you're not just good at something, think about it, like, do you want to be that person who's like constantly bothered for 10 different things? Are you somebody who's like so curious about what's happening next? And are you somebody who want to be in the, like, the captain of the ship, where you're like, hey, I want to have a voice in this, hey, I want to have a voice in this, hey, I want to be constantly touching all aspects to ensure that it actually meets customer needs? And also if you're empathetic.
Yeah.
So I would just say, each of us would have certain traits. Just reflect on your own experiences, understand what, and today you have a lot more information of what PMs do, which we didn't have back then. So look at it, reflect about yourselves, and see if you are right for this role. And that's, I think, the starting point for this journey.
That's amazing advice. I never like thought of that. That's amazing.
That was beautiful. I'll just add one more point, right? Like there is a lot of confusion around product management, program management, and project management, right? I get a lot of, LinkedIn messages and emails saying, hey, I want to transition from developer or designer or XYZ to product management. And first question I ask them is why? Right? They're like, oh, that's because I'm really good at, cross group collaboration. I'm really good at managing people. I'm really good at this. I'm like, then my default response is, then you are talking about program management. You're talking about project management. When your, analysis of why you want to move does not include the word product and nothing about building products, then you got this wrong, right? So I would definitely say go read up. And it's not to say that one is better than the other, but they're all just very different, right? Like you might be an excellent program manager, but a very mediocre product manager, and vice versa. You might be an excellent product, manager and a really, really bad program manager, right? These are not, there are some skills that overlap, but there are some that don't as well. So I would say if you're considering, product management, just like how you do for any other role, do the due diligence, go read up about the difference between these three things, and kind of like, what Chaitra said, ask, do some, self analysis of why do I want to go after, either of these roles, and then start from there.
No. I'm going to start reading some questions from the chat. We have one question. What advice do you have for someone who is in a different field, like HR, and want to be a PM? Vidya or Chaitra, whoever wants to answer.
Go for it, Chaitra.
Okay, sure. So I think Vidya just mentioned, and I would relay that, first of all, like, understand your motivation. Why do you want to be a PM? Like, it can be for various reasons, right? It can be a reason, like we gave you a lot of depth about what we enjoy about being PM. So if you have some of those qualities and you think it will translate really well, sure. But really, but we also mentioned to you that PM, like growth PM, yes, it's a lot more on strategy. But in general, when you start off, like if you want to be a feature PM, you also have to be very curious about building things. So if you are an HR, I do not know like what made you think about why you wanted to be an HR. So it's what I would take away is like, great, you have good people skills, which is important. You need to love people if you want to be in product management, but that is not it, right? How do you place yourself, like going down the weeds of like, hey, why should we build some, like the specific, like why should we log something, why are these logs important, like logs will impact performance of this product. So you need to be really curious about building things if you want to be in product management. So if you're I'm not biased towards any engineers being PMs, but I would ask non-engineers, be it whichever, if you're in marketing, if you're in sales, if you are in HR, whatever, if you want to be a PM, like just take a minute to ask like what about PM really interests you and why do you want to do that? And then like probably if you want to like validate it yourself, like just try collaborating with a group in a hackathon and see if you can add value there. Okay, you might not code, but can you come up with ideas to think about like how to differentiate your whatever you're hacking over the rest of the groups and still be somebody who can pivot and win that hackathon? Can you play a role and influence them in some way? And are you really curious about like why should I build this about something else? And how your experience can translate is like we mentioned, there are different kind of products. So let's say I'm building an HR related product, and if you are, or if you've already worked as an HR, you probably have a fair understanding of what problems exist and how do other HRs use your product. So that's something that you can use for your benefit, which aligns really well. So take your benefits irrespective of which field you are from, but also be your own devil's advocate to think about why this role is for me. And especially when you're breaking into tech and becoming a PM, there will be a barrier which you have to cross by bridging the gaps for developing those tech skills. So are you really curious about developing those tech skills needed to do this role? So just, I would say, reflect on all those. And once you have it, if you are an HR and you want to translate, try for HR related products because that's where you have an edge over the others. And then, like Vidya mentioned and I mentioned, indicate all your experiences, be it entrepreneurial experiences, indicate leadership. It indicates that you are somebody who can get things done, and you are somebody who can work in ambiguous environment, and showcase like your problem solving skills. Probably as an HR, you would also have an advantage of communication, but make it a little more well rounded in other aspects.
Vidya, do you want to add something else, or?
No, I think she covered it really well. Let's keep moving because I see that there's a stream of questions coming in.
Yeah. Another one is, how can you stay on top of the latest trends in technology? If there's like so much content, how can we like track everything, or like just like know like the
That's a very good question. So I'll say this, right? You cannot stay on top of everything. If that's your goal, then you would be spending all day just reading news and consuming all the gazillion pieces of content that's coming out, right? We live in an age of information overload, right? So I would say prioritize to understand which field do you want to go. Do you want to go horizontal or do you want to go vertical, right? Like for example, I'll take my example, right? Like when I was working in virtual reality, my focus was to understand everything about AR and VR, right? I didn't care much about what was happening in IoT or Bitcoin or quantum computing because that was not like really relevant, as much to what I was working on. Sure, at an ephemeral layer, I still consumed pieces of content, but I went really deep in the area that I was working on. And that's the same thing I do now, because when I'm working on a growth strategy role, I take a lot of time to, understand how all these companies are going, how are they monetizing, right? Like what are they doing to ensure that the systems stand up during, a million users, getting onboarded on the same day, So I would say this, there are, if you look at, if you're looking for pieces of content itself, Apple News, Google News, they're both really good. Like I start my day by just, browsing the news app. Pick your channels, even that can be a lot. So pick your channels and pick, established media outlets. Like that's what I go to, right? And secondly, podcasts. There are so many podcasts, which both cover the horizontal as well as vertical, right? And if you're just trying to break into the whole design thinking, then try to look for entrepreneur podcasts, like how I built that, or Pivot, for example. These are all really good podcasts, right? The third piece of content would be blogs, right? This can be LinkedIn articles or Medium blogs, but I would say be selective on whom you follow and kind of read through, because sometimes this can be conflicting, right? And especially in some of in the age we are living in, I can publish whatever I want. So I am very cautious about consuming, pieces of content by people who especially who are not kind of like, vetted in that industry. And I always take it with a pinch of salt, because that might not be the truest source of information for all unless there's a source attached, right? So put your prioritization, skills to use, and then kind of vet and dedicate time box it, right? Like spend, maybe 30 minutes in the morning, 30 minutes before going to bed to like just, browse through. And as you start building this habit, you will realize that at a point in time, you would actually start building the muscle and you would gradually gravitate towards certain things than others. And that's a good signal for you.
Yeah, I would just add on to that by saying like developing that habit is super important. Like every day is something. You have to like be it morning, be it evening, whichever convenient, whatever your convenient times are. And also like for like I think Vidya mentioned this, I'm just reiterating few things. Like for me, it really helps that I follow a few people who I know are like veterans. Like I can give you some examples. Like I really like Sachin Rekhi. His blogs and his articles are like really so lucid and top class. I follow him. I follow Ken Norton, and there are a few other names which we can give out at the end of the session if that's helpful. So just follow like selective people and watch out for like their Twitter feeds. When I know like when these people share articles, it really has meat in that content. So if I can't consume 100 things nobody can consume, I really go after those. And then yeah, maybe like there are a lot of books as well which are like very good indulgences for like what's happening in the industry, like some of the books like Extreme Ownership for Leadership, Blitz Scaling for like learning about how to scale startups, like how to grow them, and what point how did all these companies become successful. So you have to just start somewhere, and once you are on that league, I think you'll start getting all the other signals from these people about what they are reading and how do I follow something, or how they are sharing the gist of something else.
Yeah. I know that there's one person, sorry, one liner. I just got a message from Priyanka Mishra. Does Microsoft hire new grads for product management role? Yes, they do. They hire new grads. Yes. Keep going, Bianca.
I'm gonna ask is two questions related to the resume. So how can I make my resume stand out if I'm a like experienced professional? And then the other one is if I lost my internship due to the pandemic, can I add it to the resume?
I didn't follow the second part of the question, Bianca. Can you repeat it?
The second one is if I lost the internship due to the pandemic, do you recommend to add it to the resume even if like it was canceled?
I see. Okay, sure.
Go ahead, Chaitra.
Okay, so first part of the question, firstly about how do I make myself stand out? I think Vidya covered it really well before. So I indicated the top skills that we will look for, like communication skills, leadership skills, analytical skills. Of course, your technical skills play a great role, but it depends upon the product to product. Like I would say, if you are a infrastructure PM like me, you need very strong CS skills. But if you are a product manager who wants to be more on the sides of like Instagram, Pinteresty like products, you need to be very creative. So I would look for somebody like how Vidya mentioned. I would look for some X factor to see like, okay, if you're a strong developer product, if you're an engineer who is transforming, like, hey, what is your curiosity? Have you like really contributed to open source, for example? Or have you like, how do you showcase your chops, which gives me the ground that you're the right person for this? Or if you are on this creative product side, I would want to look at like maybe some portfolios or even sketches or something that can indicate. So so pick a role, and based on that specific role, understand what is the breadth and what is the depth. So depth can be technology, depth can be creativity, depth can be like strategy. So if it is a strategy oriented role, you have to focus on like, okay, how do I demonstrate the strategy thinking, like growing some nonprofit? That shows a lot about how you have like strategic hats in you to lead and grow something. And like I mentioned about creative and technical skills as well, like how, so breadth and depth. Ultimately in your resume, make sure that you convey that you are good at communication and you're entrepreneurial in nature, and a problem solver who is very curious.
Vidya, do you want to add?
No, I think she covered. I don't want to reinforce anything that Chaitra said because she's on her A game here. I just want to cover as many questions as possible. So let's keep
Let's go.
Can you talk about the interview process? Do you know if we need do you have like a do you know we need to code in the interview process?
Yeah. So I think we did a pretty good, thorough step by step in the last session that we did. But I'll tell you this, right? Let me just give you an overview of the 7 or 8 roles. And this is not based on a company, but I don't think we'll have the time now to kind of deep dive into each of these. But that being said, this should kind of give you an, idea, right? So for a product management interview, again, this is not company specific. So this is more of a holistic, overview. You will first start with a resume screen. Obviously, the recruiters look, and then you might have 1 or 2 rounds of recruiter screens, depending on the company, 1 or 2 rounds of phone screens to vet, to decide if you're even, if there's a good fit between you and the role to invite you for an on-site. And then you might have anywhere from, 4 to 7 rounds for an on-site interview, right? And for each of these rounds, it's going to be a combination of, number one, product strategy, right? If you are the CEO of Zoom and COVID-19 hit, what would you do? Right? If I'm giving you $1 billion, where would you go and invest? Things like that, right? Secondly, so that's product strategy, right? The second kind of interview is product design, right? Now, product design is going to be all about, it's not more about what you will build in that question. It's more about how you think to come to that, what your thought process and how you, analyze and how you kind of walk the interviewer and take the interviewer with you, in that, particular interview round. The third is technical, right? Now, technical does not equal coding. That is a misnomer, right? Technical, some teams will require you to code. I think for a role like Chaitra's, you very well probably need to know how to code. But for a role like mine, I don't code, but I understand technology really well. If I have to think about how am I going to grow the service, I have to think about what's going to happen in the back end when I have like 1 million users, all signing up on the same day. So you need to understand technology, right? So you'll have questions that kind of capture that. The fourth kind of interview round is analytical, right? This is all about metrics. This is all about figuring out how do you execute, right? How do you measure success for Facebook filters or Instagram filters, right? How do you measure success for the virtual backgrounds in Zoom, right? So this is kind of to figure out how do you execute, what are your analytical chops like? The fifth kind of interview is all estimation. Now, only some companies do this. Google does this, Microsoft, some teams in Microsoft does this. These are more, super ambiguous blue sky questions like how many cars are going on the roads of Seattle at 5 p.m. on a Friday, right? How many masks do we have to produce for the month of August? Super, blue sky questions, but these are all your estimation questions. The sixth round is behavioral, right? Now we all know, different aspects of behavioral questions will pop up. I don't think I need to kind of elaborate on this. And the last and the seventh one is leadership, right? So depending upon which company, which level you're interviewing for, it's going to be a combination of these 7 rounds. Chaitra, do you want to add something?
I think you covered the breadth of it. And yes, I think going into the deep text, I think I was just answering some questions on chat. So going into the depth of like how to prepare for each of these 7 aspects is a discussion in itself. So, yep. I mean, I'll try to do, I think this is one of my takeaways from last session. I want to do this where I want to take some time out and actually write out a blog probably for the folks to leverage. I will do my best effort in covering that.
Maybe if folks have interest in that, like Chaitra and I can like tag team and kind of put something out on LinkedIn maybe.
Yeah. Do you think that's a good idea? Like for whatever things Vidya just covered, like technical, analytical, and somebody asked about design and leadership.
Everyone will love it.
Okay, so I see a lot of yes, please. So maybe that's
a lot of yes
for Chaitra and I.
Love it.
So yeah, we'll just talk through each of the 7 rounds and kind of what to expect and some example questions so that, that kind of orient you on what to expect. Okay.
Pointers on what we base, how we judge people based on these rounds as well. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Let's follow up on that. I think that's a brilliant idea, Chaitra.
Yeah. For a resume, what technical skills do you look for?
Sorry, what? Can you
in a resume? What technical skills do you look for?
Okay, technical skills. So Vidya, you want to take this or you want me to take this? I'm fine.
Oh, go for it. I think you're more closer to that.
Okay, so technical skills, again, it completely depends upon the kind of product. So I would say the bare minimum I would look for is at least like bare minimum, I would give it to like people who are transitioning from non-engineering roles to engineering to product. I would look for like, do they at least know how to build products? Like if you are a marketing person, I'm sure there might be roles where you can be great, but if you want to be a PM, I at least want to know you have empathy for developers and who are building it. So like, have you taken part in some hackathons and have you built like some simple website? Do you know the basics of it? So that would be my bare minimum checking, as like somebody has technical skills or not. And then it goes to like deeper levels of like what levels of technical skills. Like let's say you are more on enterprise product PMs like me, or like Google Cloud, AWS, or like storage products like Nutanix and others of the world. So then I would say the easiest transition is for engineers, because these products are deep in the weeds of technology. So for engineers who want to become PMs, think about wear that hat, where you know where are your technical skills. If you have already built like storage products, you can become an PM who, if you can understand that's like how do these people use these products. So for somebody who is like a greenfield, no, I haven't done any of those, but I want to transition, bare minimum skills of like I have built something. I built one app. I built some website. I took part in like hackathons for like 5 hackathons. Okay, that's a good enough point for me to start off that you know something about building.
I have another question. What do you like the most about being a PM? Chaitra, Vidya.
Yeah, go ahead, Vidya.
What do
Sure.
I like the most? I think it's the sheer delight of just building products. That's as
Yeah.
cliche as it sounds, but I think there is building ideas are cheap, execution is hard, right? Very hard. Try to, for me, it is all about thinking about a problem space, much in advance before it becomes obvious, and trying to build products that actually are impactful. Like if I look back in my 7+ years of corporate life, every product I worked on has had a massive impact. And I wouldn't say impact necessarily translate to just like daily or monthly active users. It's more about how is it enriching the life of somebody. Like, is it making somebody more productive? Is it making somebody more efficient? Is it saving somebody time, money, or effort? Right? Impact can be measured in different ways. For me, I think it's just the sheer delight of building impactful products.
Yeah, that's so. So I would add to that, like that I have been mentioning, I think all through, that you need to be excited about building things if you want to be a PM. So that's a given. What really excites me is I feel like I'm the captain of the ship. Like I'm the only person who is going to who is actually dealing with the customers to see what their true pain points are. Right? That engineering who is spending all their time and efforts in building this does not have that visibility. So I need to understand that. So one of the first PM 101s that I had learned from my professor was, before building a product, make sure that before building a product right, make sure that you're building the right product. So it's my duty to ensure that I'm building the right product, and this is required. So going from there and then going down to the all the things that we spoke about, execution, where like literally painting that picture of like, okay, I know people need this, I know they are having these problems, but how does this look like and what does this do? That comes to the use cases. What do you want it to do, and how do you want, and how are these problems going to be solved? And then you also wear the hat of from this company, like how are we going to make business out of this? If I build, do I just want to give this as a free product? And how, and okay, even if I want to give this as a free product, like how am I going to make money later, because we are all working for profit organizations? And then coming back to like actually developing all these insights and building my case, and then going back to the leadership or to the engineering to say, hey guys, I have something really nice, I think we should build this, and then give them all the data about why I think we should build this, and what are my quick gist of like how we are going to do about it, and why is this possible. That is where some technological understanding helps, where you can think about like, hey, I'm painting a picture that I want to build the next rocket ship. People are going to be like, what are you talking about? Do you know what building a rocket ship would take? So at least I want to be technical enough to say, yeah, yes, I know that I need to do A, B, and C, D to do build a rocket ship. A and D are already there, and B is somewhere where our company has expertise. Maybe C is something that we can bridge. So this whole part of like going from 0 to 1 and being the glue amidst all the teams really like excites me. Basically, when I'm launching, I'm saying like I'm launching this product. Only a PM says that I'm launching this product, although like I would not take any credit away from engineering that they built it.
So I'm gonna take this question as the last question. How to deal with conflicting ideas, competing products in the company?
Very good
Ah,
question, I would say.
that's that is where you as the PM and your amazing ability to drive alignment and be the single threaded owner comes into play, right? Because and these are people often dismiss the value and importance of these things, right? When you have, let's talk about conflicting ideas, right? Like conflicting ideas is, it's a more localized problem. I'm assuming that you're talking about conflicting ideas within a team, within an organization, right? So one way by which you can, there are multiple ways by which you can kind of like, tackle this, but one way is by using data, right? Because ideas can be biased, but data isn't for the most part, right? So unless you want to bias it, right? So use data. Do and second thing would be talk to the user. We can dream up whatever we want, but if it's not resonating with the user, if it is not actually in line with what the user is, going through, the problem that they are, wanting to be solved, then irrespective of how genius of an idea it is, you're not going to have anyone use it, right? So if you have conflicting ideas, absolutely, like use data, do a thorough fact check, and then try to see which one is more appealing. Talk to the user. Any product that is being launched without going through a user research, experience review, and and the likes is a bad product, because you're kind of building it, you're so cut away from the reality and the users who would be using your product, that it's probably going to have vaping, many gaps, right? The third tool that you can, use to deal with conflicting ideas is experiment, right? Now, experimentation is more easier said than done, especially in enterprise products. Like Chaitra can attest to it. How it's very hard to experiment in an enterprise, product, just because of the different agreements that you have in place and stuff like that. But for a consumer-centric product, um, you know, experiment. You must have seen that your friend is getting some Facebook feature, but you're not getting it. Why is it? Because they're experimenting. They're ABC testing, right? So try to experiment to see which one resonates, which one is moving, your key OKRs, objectives and key results, which one is moving your top line metrics. And that's an excellent way to kind of, deal with conflicting ideas. Now, competing products in the company, that's a whole different ball game, right? That is where I think Chaitra talked to this, in the beginning. You as a product manager not only build products, but you're also responsible to manage sideways, manage down, and manage up, right? So you have to drive alignment within your team, within your org, within other orgs in the company. And it's interesting because I'm kind of like right in the middle of that right now, because we're doing our FY21 fiscal planning. I spend, half my day, every single, day, just talking to all these different people and bringing them along the journey, bringing them. It's not about my idea versus your idea, because at the end of the day, we are one company, one Microsoft, right? So it's more about, hey, how can we, join forces and make this even better, right? So it's more about like bringing them along the ride and also learning from them. I think that's another thing that we all grossly underestimate. As a product manager, you got to kick your ego out of the door. Okay, you might be the greatest visionary, but if somebody has a better idea than you, then you got to say yes, and you got to listen, and you got to embrace that, even if that idea is coming from an intern, right? You got to kick your ego out of the door. So you got to always be open to listening and learning. I think these things, you can test these really well when you deal with, conflicting situations or competing products.
Chaitra, do you want to add?
Sure, I think Vidya gave a very good depth. I would just say, yes, firstly, when you say conflicting ideas, I would be a listener if somebody, because we always want to build the best things for the company, right? So I would listen in if somebody, and this happens constantly in all our roles, like it can be for completely competing ideas, on just that when you want to build some thing, and maybe there are like competing ways to build it, and like three different teams feel that, hey, why are you choosing A over B? So you as a PM has to be able to justify that, why do I want to choose something over something else? So even before I justify that, I would look for what the other person is saying. Like, let's say another PM has this idea that I think we should build the next, like the VR thing, and I have say I'm going to go and say, like, let's take me and Vidya's example. Vidya will come and say, hey, I think VR is going to be the next big thing, we should build that. And I'm going to say, hey, I think people are building so many applications today, and we still don't have good databases to build to scale the applications. We should build a database. So what is more important? So then you'll do the typical, like, this goes back to at which level you are vetting it. Like sometimes you start with like target market fit, like what is the TAM, like what is the, how does the market look like? Because when you're building something, if you build something where users are not going to buy, that is when, if market is not ready, no matter what you build, it's not going to sell. So let's say VR has adoption today, but maybe like 20 years ago, somebody had the same idea, but people were just not receptive to that. And if you had built that product 20 years ago, it would be a failure. So I would suggest, I did mention in the chat, you should all read this. You should follow this person called Mark Anderson. He's one of the geniuses in this area, and his PM Arca blog where he talks about product market fit. So you have to see that how big is this market, and is this market something that's growing, so that my company and my idea can become the next $1 billion idea, next $1 billion, like $10 billion idea. Let's say like Vidya and I will both present our cases, and we are also actively listening to the other person. And let's say I have the idea where I say it's a 1 billion case, and Vidya's is like 10 billion. I would more than happily say, Vidya, I think we should prioritize building yours first, and then we will think about mine. So I think be open, and also have your case on like target market. So these are like the basic pointers. How big is the market, and is the market growing, and how competitive is that market? Are you going to get a lead if you enter now, or is that market already too crowded to for you to penetrate? And if at all you still want to do, what is your niche? How are you going to differentiate today, and what would be your sustained differentiation strategy? So these are a little more deeper questions to just take through in a like a session like this, but I think we have just given you the basic pointers to dig deeper.
Thank you. This was amazing advice, amazing conversation. Before we leave, I just want to thank you everyone for being here. But this is a virtual community. We want to connect. So if you want, add your LinkedIn profile so we can all connect and continue the conversation. Also, I want to mention Bianca. She wrote an article of our past webinar. So really go to her Medium profile. You can find the article, and it has like the key notes, like discussion of the last webinar. So go and follow her just so you can read it.
And also, like, I know we couldn't get to all the questions that you all had, but thank you so much for joining us. And then feel free to connect with both Chaitra and I on LinkedIn. I put the URL, but even otherwise, if you just go and search for us, we should be quite easy to find. But yeah, if you have more questions that we couldn't get to, feel free to, DM me on LinkedIn, and then, let's keep the conversation going, and good luck.
Yeah, sure. That would work, because I think this was like a lot of questions which were a lot more in depth. This was not the right forum for it, so we couldn't really address it, even though I did think they were great questions.
Yep. Yeah. Thanks, Bianca, for putting yet another.
Yeah, thank you everyone for reorganizing and giving us.
Yep.
Thanks for always.
Everyone, we have amazing speakers lined up. Just follow our social media. We're gonna upload the recording of this webinar on our YouTube channel in the upcoming days. So stay tuned and see you in 2 weeks for our next webinar. Thank you. Thank you, Chaitra. Thank you, Vidya.
All right. Bye, folks.
Thank you.
Thank you.